Alright, welcome back again for another draw with me story time type video. This time I'm going to talk again about weird paranormal things that have happened to me. This time we're talking about ghosts. For a long time I really didn't think I believed in ghosts or anything like that, but because I'm a pretty skeptical person. Very, a lot of my beliefs are, based solidly in, factual, science and, provable things. But also, I definitely found myself be more, I guess amused with, the what-ifs of the world. What if this was actually real? And, I've had experiences now I'm I really don't know. I really don't understand. And my fiance's especially, had some very interesting, paranormal experiences that, there's no reason he will lie about that because he seemed pretty freaked out and weirded out by them. I have no reason to believe he's, making it up or whatever. But we just moved not too long ago into a house which is my fiance's grandparents' house originally. It's owned by his mom now. But before that we lived in a couple different apartments, and our first apartment was a very new building. It was built to be apartments. We always joked that it was haunted. Mostly because pretty much all of the tenants of that apartment were old women. We're just well, feasibly, since our landlord really preferred renting to elderly people, somebody might have died in this apartment. There is no evidence of that, or but it was just a thing we would joke about, oh, this place is haunted. But it definitely wasn't haunted. The only crazy thing that happened there was a bear that was hanging out inside the city of Ellsworth for some reason decided to steal our bird feeder shortly before we moved out of that apartment and crushed it like a tin can, which it was a big bird feeder. But nothing paranormal, just wildlife, the usual shenanigans. But the apartment we used to live in most recently before we moved into this house was in Unity. This apartment in Unity used to be a big old industrial chicken barn. And it's not the only building in that town that was converted into housing from a chicken barn, because the college in Unity, where I went, the two of the major freshman dorms were both old chicken barns. And they're usually 2 stories tall and these just big, long, rectangular buildings. So that was the building we lived in. There's several apartments in it, and the one we lived in was the largest of all of those apartments. Because it used to, when it was built, the landlord who converted it to apartments made his own apartment in it. And this one had a downstairs and then sort of a smaller loft upstairs for a bedroom and another bathroom. It had a lot of character. I mean, being a barn, for one, it was just built very weird. And the guy who originally built it, before our landlord had bought it, he hand-carved this giant lion statue with a shield into the staircase that went upstairs. So there was a lot of, it was 90% of the flooring in that apartment, including pretty much everything but the bathrooms and the kitchen, was this thick red shag carpet on everything. So yeah, it had its quirks. And the other quirks it had was that it was most definitely haunted. There's no way. I didn't know very much about what had happened previously, or who had previously lived in this apartment or what. But this place there was some weird things that happened here. And both me and Barry, individually and together, we both had experiences in this apartment that just I don't know. I don't know how else to explain them. I tried to rationalize them the best I could, and they weren't like explicitly scary, but they were definitely like, what the hell? What is happening here? So these are just gonna be some of the weird things that we witnessed or mostly heard. It was a lot of like weird sounds, which the soundproofing between our apartment and the other apartments was pretty good, and the people who lived in all the other apartments were quite quiet, either single people or just like a couple. They weren't very like noisy people, weren't really like didn't bang around a lot or do anything weird like that. So I guess starting, I had written a list of all the weird things, so I guess I'll just start from the top. There was one day where my fiance Barry was home alone when I was at work, and he heard someone knock on the front door. And the weird thing is that, like, so our door opened up into like the short hallway where there was like the laundry room at the end of the hallway, and then across from us was our neighbor's door, and then like the door that went outside. And the door that went outside was like really squeaky and loud, and like from the top of the stairs, or like even near the stairs that went down to like our entryway and our front door, you could definitely like hear if somebody opened or closed that door. Even if you were like in the living room, like you could hear it pretty loud. It was loud. You kind of had to like slam it shut. Like, he didn't hear anybody come in or leave, but he definitely heard somebody knock on that door. And our neighbors were not home. And even if they had been, they're like, I don't think we hardly ever spoke to them. We didn't know their names. They were very like kept to themselves. So he went down and like checked, and there was nobody there, and of course he didn't hear the door open. It was sort of wrote it off, but like it weirded him out enough. I was like, he definitely, like, he told me when I got home. I was like, oh, all right. And then another time I had a similar experience where I heard the doorknob jiggling on the front door, like somebody was trying to get in. And I, up until growing up, I like never, I lived out in the woods. I lived in the middle of nowhere. Like, we never locked our door, and like, if we did, like, the key was so close to the door anyways, like, it was just never locked. But I had lived in a lot of apartments prior to that with my mom, and ever since I moved in with Barry, and, like, we've lived in different apartments in more, like, developed areas. Not that Unity is, like, the most developed area, but we lived more so, like, in the town, and, like, we had a lot of neighbors in our building. I was, like, very, very paranoid about people like breaking in, I guess. And I was very sure I always locked and deadbolted the door. And so like there was one day I had heard somebody jiggling the doorknob like they were trying to come in. And there was nobody there. Again, nobody opened that like door that went outside. Open or shut it. And all day, like, we could see our entire like parking area where everyone's cars were, and I was like one of the only people that was home. And even if it was our neighbors like coming in and out, like, because I kept hearing that door open and close throughout the rest of the day that I was home, like people were just constantly walking in and out of the building, and me being basically just like I'm like a nosy old lady trapped in the body of like a 24-year-old. I was always going over to the window whenever I would like hear people like walking around a lot outside, like, oh, what's going on? I never saw anybody that day, but it sounded like there was like people moving in and out like wild. It was very strange, but again, one of those things that's like, well, it's weird, but it's not that weird, I guess. Yeah, just phantom noises. Another morning, I would usually wake up and feed the cats, because Barry worked on a farm, so that was like really close by. So he usually wouldn't wake up before me or like even with me, but I would wake up because I'd have to be to work by like 8 o'clock. So I would wake up go downstairs and feed the cats, and then use the bathroom, and then come back upstairs to shower. And there was one morning that, like, I had gotten up and fed the cats and used the bathroom, and after I was done using the bathroom, I heard heavy footsteps upstairs in where would be our bedroom. It sounded like Barry had walked into the upstairs bathroom and then back out, which I didn't really think too much of, but it was like 6:30 in the morning, and like he almost never woke up that early. You know, if he was gonna wake up and use the bathroom early in the morning, usually it was around like 5. But, you know, I walked upstairs, not really thinking too much of it, but when I got upstairs, he was snoring. He was out cold, and this was within like 30 seconds of hearing footsteps upstairs, which like really weirded me out. Okay, again, like, what do you do? And there was another, like, similar morning where I had taken a shower and gotten out, and Barry was downstairs listening to something, because it was one of my days off, so he was up by this time, and I had slept in, so I took a shower later in the day, so it wasn't weird that he was awake now. But he was downstairs, like, just quietly listening to something on his phone. Couldn't really hear, like, what it was. And I was upstairs getting ready, and I heard very distinctly, like, a nasally man's voice from downstairs, as if somebody had, like, was inside talking to Barry downstairs. And so I got dressed and got ready and came down. I'm like, who are you talking to? Like, there's definitely someone down here talking that wasn't him. And he was just so confused. He's like, I didn't hear anything. There wasn't anybody here. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And it's another one of those things. And then, of course, we had experiences where, like, we both heard something, which was even more affirming to, like, it's one thing to have, like, a weird experience when it's just you that's experiencing it, but when there's another person that's like, yeah, I hear that too, that gets, like, even more, like, there's something weird happening here. And I definitely, like, I distinctly remember one time where I had just gotten home from work, and both of the cats were, like, downstairs in the kitchen with me and Barry. So, like, everybody was downstairs. No one was upstairs. And we both heard footsteps walking quickly, like, through the upstairs, like, through our bedroom, pretty much. And, yeah, it's just kind of like, it sounded like they had ran from the bedroom over to the top of the stairs. And I went up and, like, looked around, and there was nobody there, and there's no way somebody could have, like, gotten in there and gotten out in that time. There wasn't even a way, like, you could get through the window and get in. And there was other times where, like, we would hear things fall in the kitchen or get clunked around in the kitchen when we were both in the living room, and the cats were also, like, accounted for. And you'd go into the kitchen and there's nothing wrong. Nothing's been moved. Nothing fell over. And even times where, like, the cats would be, like, you could see them sitting, like, near the kitchen table, and things would clunk around, and they would get spooked and come running over to us all, like, puffed up, like they were scared. And so that's even, like, the cats hearing things and us hearing things is a little strange, a little too strange for me. But I think the most notable event that happened in that house that, like, really, really freaked me out, but not at the time, but just more, like, after the fact, when I thought about it the next day, was we had, like, just moved in to this apartment, and it was, like, the middle of summer. It was stupidly, stupidly hot, especially in that apartment. It had, like, no ventilation. In the summer, it was incredibly hot, and we weren't allowed to have an AC or anything, because electricity was included in our rent. So we were just, like, sweating to death, like, barely able to sleep. But I had fallen asleep pretty hard, and we had a fan on and everything, but it was very, very, very hot still. And out of nowhere, in the middle of the night, I woke up in a cold sweat. Absolutely just freezing cold. The whole room felt cold. And so I like scrambled to like grab a blanket off the floor next to the bed because like it was so hot, like all of the blankets were just off the bed. Like it was nothing. It was way too hot. And so I grabbed this blanket off the floor, and after I do, we have all these little tiny rubber ducks that Barry bought before we like moved in together. And he's like, every time we move somewhere, he'll like hide them out in different places for like me to find, and we've left some behind in previous apartments for the new tenants to find. But since we had just moved in, the cats really like them too. So we have a couple like that the cats play with and like bat around. And there was one that I knew was on the floor, but it was pretty far away from the bed. It was like sort of between the bed and the bedroom door. It was way too far away for me to have like hit it with the blanket or anything like that. But like after I got that blanket on, it was still freezing cold in that room. The duck squeaked. Like I saw it on, like I knew it was on the floor. I didn't see it because I was trying to go back to sleep. But it sounded like someone had stepped on that rubber duck. Which just absolutely like confused the hell out of me at the time. But I like looked around and like our one cat was sleeping on the bed, and the other one, when I opened my eyes, I could see was like sitting at the top of the stairs outside of the bedroom, which she would always sit there like she was like guarding. Like she would stay there all night and just like sit and watch from the top of the stairs. I don't know what, but she was watching something. And so like I knew it was neither of them. And it wasn't me, and it wasn't Barry. That one was definitely probably the most concerning, because then it stopped being cold after that. Like, I woke up and I was hot again, like an hour later, so. I don't know. There's some strange things that happened in that apartment, and I'm sure there's gonna be plenty of strange things now that we live in this very, well, I guess not very old house, but it's an old house in also the middle of the woods. There's definitely bound to be some strange happenings here. That definitely, like, feels less haunted. That's for sure. That last apartment, I don't know what happened there, but, you know, maybe I don't want to know. Anyways, thank you for listening again to this video. I really appreciate it. And hopefully it was, I guess, some interesting, fun little stories about ghosts. I wouldn't really call them scary, just strange little happenings. And other than that, I guess I will see you next time.